The rumble of the truck's engine cut through the thick, smoke-laden air as Corporal Turk Hassan and his unit rolled into Hama. The city was a shadow of itself, charred buildings, shattered windows, and the acrid scent of burning lingering like a curse. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the distant crackle of gunfire and the occasional wail of a stray dog. Turk tightened his grip on his rifle, his knuckles whitening. Beside him, Private Malik shifted uneasily. "This place is a graveyard," Malik muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Keep your mouth shut and your eyes open," Sergeant Rashid barked from the front. His face was unreadable, hardened by years of war, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. The truck lurched to a stop outside an abandoned bunker, its concrete walls pockmarked with bullet holes. The unit spilled out, boots crunching on broken glass and debris. Turk's stomach twisted as he caught sight of a child's shoe half buried in the rubble. He forced himself to look away. "Set up here," Rashid ordered. "We hold this position until further notice." The men moved quickly, hauling supplies inside the dim, musty interior of the bunker. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, blood, Turk realized with a grimace. Malik wiped sweat from his brow, his hands trembling slightly as he unloaded ammunition crates. "How long do you think we'll be here?" Turk didn't answer. He didn't know. Outside, the distant echo of an explosion rattled the walls, sending a fine shower of dust from the ceiling. Rashid lit a cigarette, the glow casting harsh shadows across his face. "As long as it takes," he said, exhaling smoke, "until the city is clean." Turk swallowed hard. Clean. The word sat heavy in his chest. He had seen what clean meant before. Night fell quickly over Hama, the darkness swallowing the ruins whole. The soldiers took their positions, rifles at the ready, listening to the sounds of a city holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a single gunshot rang out, sharp, final. Turk closed his eyes. The mission had only just begun. The bunker was a tomb of silence once the men settled in, the only sounds the occasional shuffle of boots and the low hum of hushed conversation. Turk leaned against the cold concrete wall, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, but sleep felt impossible. The air was thick with tension, each man lost in his own thoughts, their breaths shallow and measured. Outside, the wind howled through the shattered streets, whistling through cracks in the bunker's walls like a restless spirit. Turk pulled his jacket tighter around himself, his fingers brushing the worn photograph in his pocket, his sister's face, smiling, frozen in time before the war had torn their lives apart. Then, a sound. Faint, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Turk's head snapped up. Across the dimly lit room, Malik's eyes met his, wide with alarm. "You hear that?" Malik whispered. Turk nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. The knocking came again, 3 slow, deliberate raps against the bunker's outer wall. Sergeant Rashid, seated near the entrance, didn't even look up from cleaning his sidearm. "Wind," he muttered. "Or rats. This place is full of them." But the rhythm was too precise, too human. Private Fadi, the youngest of the unit, let out a nervous chuckle. "Maybe it's the ghosts of this city." No one laughed. The knocking stopped. For a long moment, the only sound was the ragged breathing of the men. Then, scratch, 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 like nails dragging slowly down the concrete. Malik's breath hitched. "That's not rats." Turk's pulse pounded in his ears. He forced himself to stand, rifle raised, and move toward the sound. The others followed suit, weapons at the ready, their shadows stretching grotesquely across the walls in the flickering lantern light. "Who's there?" Rashid barked, his voice cutting through the silence. No answer. Turk pressed his ear to the wall. For a second, there was nothing. Then, a whisper, too faint to make out words, but unmistakably human. A voice, rasping and broken, just on the other side. His blood ran cold. Malik grabbed his arm. Turk, what? A sudden violent thud shook the wall, as if something heavy had slammed against it. The men staggered back, rifles trained on the source of the noise. Silence. Then, from the darkness beyond the bunker, a child's voice, soft, pleading. "Let me in." Turk's breath caught. The words sent a chill down his spine. Rashid's jaw clenched. "Ignore it. It's a trick." "But what if it's a kid?" Fadi protested, his voice cracking. "What if they're hurt?" "There are no children left in Hama," Rashid said darkly. "Not alive." The voice came again, closer now. "Please, it's cold." Malik's hands shook. "We can't just..." Another thud, harder this time. The concrete groaned under the impact. Rashid raised his rifle. "Everyone, stand ready." Tarek's finger hovered over the trigger, his heart hammering. The knocking resumed, faster now, frantic, desperate. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Minutes stretched like hours. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Rashid lowered his weapon. "First watch stays up. The rest of you, try to get some sleep." Turk knew sleep wouldn't come. Not with that voice still echoing in his mind. "Let me in." Outside, the wind wailed like a thing in pain. The first night in Hama had only just begun. The second night in Hama was worse. Turk sat with his back against the bunker wall, his rifle resting across his knees. The lanterns had burned low, casting long, flickering shadows that danced like specters across the concrete. The others had finally succumbed to exhaustion, their breathing uneven but deep, all except Malik, who sat rigid beside him, eyes darting to the entrance every few seconds. "You should sleep," Turk murmured. Malik shook his head. "Not after last night." Turk didn't argue. He couldn't blame him. The whispers had stopped after dawn, but the memory of them clung like cobwebs, sticky and suffocating. Then, just as the silence began to feel bearable, "Help me." A child's voice, barely audible, drifting from the far corner of the bunker. Turk's blood turned to ice. Malik stiffened. "Did you?" "Help me." Closer this time, right behind them. Turk spun, rifle raised, but there was nothing. Just empty darkness. Across the room, Private Fadi jerked awake, his face pale. "Who said that?" No one answered. The voice had come from inside the bunker. Sergeant Rashid stirred, his hand already on his sidearm. Eyes sharp, he growled. "Someone's messing with us." But the air was too still, too heavy, for it to be a prank. Then laughter. High-pitched, giggling. The sound skittered across the floor, weaving between the sleeping men, as if a child were darting just out of sight. Fadi scrambled to his feet, his rifle shaking in his hands. "This isn't funny." The laughter stopped. A long, agonizing silence stretched. Then, from the shadows near the entrance, a whisper. "You left me outside." Tarek's breath caught. That voice. It was the same one from last night. The one begging to be let in. Malik's hands trembled. "It's not possible." We locked the door. Nothing could have. A sudden thud against the ceiling made them all flinch. Dust rained down as something heavy dragged itself across the roof. Scratch. 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 Fadi let out a strangled noise. "It's on top of us." Rashid's jaw tightened. Lights. Now. Turk grabbed a lantern and swung it toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the bunker's ceiling, and the handprint. Fresh. Smudged in something dark. Blood. Malik made a choked sound. That wasn't there before. The scratching stopped. Then, from directly above them, the voice whispered, "Found you." The lantern flickered and went out. In the suffocating dark, something moved, something breathed. Tarek's finger found the trigger, but before he could fire, silence. The bunker was still, the air stale, as if nothing had happened at all. Outside, the wind howled, and the whispers began again. The whispers didn't stop. They slithered through the bunker like smoke, curling into ears, pressing against eardrums until Tarek thought his skull would split from the pressure. Pleading. Crying. Words too broken to make out, but the desperation in them was unmistakable. "Don't leave me. It's so dark. Please." Turk pressed his palms against his ears, but the voices only grew louder, as if they were coming from inside his head. Around him, the others were doing the same, Fadi rocking back and forth, Malik muttering prayers under his breath. Even Rashid's hardened expression cracking under the weight of the unseen. Then, the knocking. Not the slow, deliberate raps from before. This was frantic, relentless. A storm of small fists hammering against the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The concrete trembled under the assault, dust shaking loose in clouds. "Make it stop," Fadi begged, his voice cracking. "Make it stop." Rashid stood abruptly, his rifle clenched in white-knuckled hands. "Enough." He roared into the darkness. "Show yourself." For a heartbeat, silence. Then a giggle, high-pitched, playful. It skittered across the room, darting from corner to corner, always just out of sight. Tarek's skin prickled. The air grew thick, suffocating, like the bunker itself was holding its breath. Then, thud. Something heavy hit the far wall. Thud. Again, closer. Thud, right beside Tarek. He spun, rifle raised and froze. A handprint. Small. A child's. Pressed into the concrete in something wet and dark. Blood. Fresh. Malik let out a strangled gasp. "It's inside." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Then, a whisper, right in Tarek's ear. "You didn't let me in." He recoiled, his back hitting the wall. The lanterns flickered wildly, casting jagged shadows that twisted and lunged across the room. Fadi screamed. Something was moving in the darkness. Not a person. Not an animal. Something wrong. The shadows coiled like living things, stretching, reaching. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The whispers cut off. The knocking ceased. The bunker was silent. The men stood frozen, breaths ragged, weapons trembling in their hands. Tarek's pulse pounded in his ears. Slowly, hesitantly, he lowered his rifle. Malik exhaled shakily. "Is it over?" No one answered. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere, deep in the ruins of Hama, a child began to cry. Dawn crept into the bunker like a thief, pale light seeping through cracks in the walls. Turk hadn't slept. None of them had. The whispers had faded with the night, but the weight of them lingered, pressing against his ribs like a fist. Rashid was the first to move, his boots scraping against the concrete as he stood. "We sweep the perimeter," he ordered, voice rough. "No one goes alone." Turek nodded, forcing himself to his feet. His muscles ached, his eyes gritty with exhaustion. Beside him, Malik rubbed his face, his hands still trembling. Fadi hesitated near the entrance. What if it's still out there? Rashid didn't answer. He just pushed open the bunker door, the hinges groaning in protest. The morning air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and decay. The ruins of Hama stretched before them, skeletal buildings clawing at a smoke-stained sky. Turk's breath fogged in the cold as he stepped outside, rifle tight in his grip. Malik moved to his left, scanning the rubble. Where do we even start? Turk didn't know. The city was a maze of destruction, every shadow a hiding place. Then, Fadi gasped. Look. He pointed at the ground near a collapsed section of wall. Turk's stomach twisted. Tiny handprints. Dozens of them, smeared in dust and something darker, blood. They trailed along the broken concrete, small and frantic, as if a child had scrambled in panic. But that was impossible. No child could have been here. Not in this ruin. Not last night. Malik's voice was barely a whisper. That's not real. Rashid crouched, gloved fingers brushing one of the prints. It was fresh. The dust hadn't settled over it yet. Turk's pulse roared in his ears. The prints led toward the bunker, stopping right where the door had been. You didn't let me in. The whisper echoed in his skull. Fadi backed away, his breathing shallow. We need to go. Now. Rashid stood slowly, his face unreadable. We hold position. But we hold position. The words were final. Turk forced himself to look away from the prints. His hands felt numb. Then a giggle. High-pitched. Close. His head snapped up. Nothing. Just rubble and ruin. But the sound had been real. Malik's face was ashen. Did you? Another giggle, farther away this time. Then another, and another. Manned. Darting between the broken buildings, weaving through the wreckage. A child's laughter, playful and light, so wrong in this graveyard of a city. Rashid's jaw clenched. Move out, slow and careful. They advanced, rifles raised, following the sound. The laughter led them deeper into the ruins, past skeletal husks of homes, past the rusted carcass of an overturned car. Then, silence. The laughter stopped. Turk's skin prickled. They stood in what had once been a courtyard, the ground littered with shattered tiles. And there, in the center, a single, fresh handprint. Small. Delicate. Palm down, fingers splayed, as if something had pressed itself up from beneath the earth. Malik's breath hitched. What is this? Turk didn't answer. His throat was too tight. Then, a whisper, right beside his ear. You found me. Me. He whirled, rifle raised. But there was nothing. Just the ruins. The silence. And the handprints, stretching back the way they'd come. Leading straight to the bunker. Waiting, watching. Hungry. Lieutenant Amir's arrival should have been a relief. His jeep rolled into the ruins of Hama at midday, kicking up dust as it skidded to a stop outside the bunker. The sight of reinforcements, of authority, should have eased the tension coiled in Turk's chest. But the moment the lieutenant stepped out, his polished boots crunching over debris, Turk knew something was off. Amir's face was smooth, composed, the practiced calm of an officer who had seen too much. But his eyes, sharp, darting, betrayed him. They flicked to every shadow, every broken window, as if expecting something to lunge from the ruins. Report, Amir demanded, voice clipped. Rashid stepped forward, spine rigid. Sir, we've secured the perimeter. No hostiles sighted, but... Amir's eyebrow arched. Fadi cut in before Rashid could speak. There's something here, Lieutenant. Voices. Knocking. We've seen handprints, Malik finished, voice low. Small ones. Like a child's. Amir's expression darkened. He exhaled sharply through his nose. the sound almost a scoff. You're telling me you're spooked by dust and wind? Turk clenched his jaw. It's not the wind, sir. We've all heard it. Voices, pleading, laughing. It's stress, Amir interrupted, slicing a hand through the air. That's all this is. Hama's a ghost town. Your minds are filling in the silence. A muscle twitched in Rashid's temple. With all due respect, sir, we know what we heard. Amir's gaze flicked to the bunker entrance, then back, too fast. You've been in combat too long. Sleep deprivation. Paranoia. It happens. Turk wanted to argue. Wanted to drag Amir into the bunker at night and let him hear the whispers for himself. But the lieutenant's posture was rigid, his tone final. Malik shifted uneasily. Sir, if we could just enough. Amir's voice cracked like a whip. You have your orders. Hold this position until relieved. And for God's sake, pull yourselves together. Silence. The lieutenant turned on his heel, striding back to his jeep. But as he climbed in, Turk caught it, the way Amir's hand trembled slightly as he gripped the door. The way his eyes darted one last time to the bunker's shadowed entrance. He was afraid. The engine roared to life, and the jeep peeled away, leaving the unit standing in the dust. Fadi let out a shaky breath. He didn't even listen. Rashid's jaw tightened. He listened, he just didn't believe. Turk stared at the fading taillights. The lieutenant had dismissed them, but his fear had been real. Whatever was happening in Hama, Amir knew more than he let on. And if even an officer was scared. A whisper curled through the air, so faint Turk almost missed it. Help us. Not one voice this time. Many names. Please. Fragments of sentences, torn and desperate. Amina. Don't leave. It burns. Malik's face paled. You heard that, right? Turk nodded, his throat dry. The whispers weren't stopping. They were getting clearer. And now, they were calling for them by name. The whispers had names now. Turk sat on the bunker floor, his back pressed against the cold concrete, listening. The voices wove through the dark like threads of smoke, each one distinct, each one carrying a weight that made his chest ache. Ahmad. Layla. Please, don't leave us here. Isi. Malik leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clenched into fists. They're kids, he muttered. All of them. Turk didn't answer. He didn't need to. The voices were too young, too small, fragile things that shouldn't linger in a place like this. Fadi, curled into himself near the lantern, flinched as another whisper cut through the silence. It's so dark. Rashid exhaled sharply, his cigarette burning low between his fingers. They're just echoes, he said, but his voice lacked its usual steel. Memories in the walls, nothing more. Turk wanted to believe him, but memories didn't leave handprints. Then, a new voice. Deeper. Rougher. You remember, don't you? Turk's head snapped up. That hadn't been a child. That had been a man, weary, broken. A voice he knew. Malik stiffened. Who was that? Rashid's cigarette stilled halfway to his lips. His eyes flicked to Turk, something unspoken passing between them. The voice came again, closer now. The well, the bodies. You were there. Turk's breath caught. The well. A memory surged forward, unbidden, a scorching day years ago, the stench of decay thick in the air. A mass grave, hidden beneath the earth, children. Dozens of them. Malik's face twisted in confusion. What's he talking about? Rashid's jaw tightened. Quiet. But the voice pressed on, relentless. You buried them. You covered their screams. Turk's hands shook. He had been there. not as a participant, but as a witness, a young soldier, ordered to stand guard as the city's darkest secret was sealed away. Fadi's voice was small. What happened here? No one answered. Then, a whisper, so close it brushed against Turk's ear like a breath. They're still here. The lantern flickered. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it the faintest echo of crying. Not one voice. Hundreds. Turk closed his eyes. Hama had always been a graveyard. They were just finally hearing its dead. The knocking started again, just after midnight. Not the slow, creeping taps from before. This was violent. A hammering that shook dust from the ceiling, rattling the bunker's rusted hinges. The walls trembled as if something enormous were throwing itself against them, desperate to get in. Turk's rifle was already in his hands, his finger resting against the trigger. Across the room, Malik stood with his back pressed to the wall, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Fadi had abandoned his post entirely, retreating to the center of the bunker, his eyes darting between the door and the ceiling like a trapped animal. Only Rashid remained still, seated on an overturned crate, his face unreadable in the flickering lantern light. Bang! The sound was deafening. The entire structure groaned under the impact. Fadi flinched. We can't stay here. Rashid didn't move. We hold position. Bang. Bang. The noise came from every direction now, above, beside, below. The concrete shuddered, cracks spiderwebbing up the walls. Malik's voice was raw. It's going to bring the whole place down on us. Turk's pulse roared in his ears. He could feel the vibrations through the soles of his boots, the sheer force of whatever was outside or inside pounding against the bunker. Then, as suddenly as it began, the knocking stopped. The silence was worse. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, a whisper, so close it could have been inside Turk's own skull. Let us in. Not one voice. Many children, men, women. A chorus of the dead, their words overlapping, pleading, demanding. We're cold. We're scared. You left us here. Adi let out a strangled sob. Make it stop, please. Rashid finally stood, his movement slow, deliberate. He walked to the center of the room, his boots crunching over broken concrete. Then, with a grimace, he knelt and pressed his palm flat against the floor. Turk frowned. What are you? Rashid didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. And the bunker shuddered. A deep, resonant groan rose from beneath them, as if the earth itself were shifting. The lanterns flickered wildly, their light dancing across the walls in jagged arcs. Then, a sound. A wet, sickening crack. The floor split open. A jagged fissure tore through the concrete, snaking from wall to wall, revealing darkness beneath, a yawning void that stank of damp earth and something older, fouler. Turk staggered back. What was that? Malik's voice was barely a whisper. Oh God. From the blackness below, something moved. Fingers. Dozens of them. Small and skeletal, clawing at the edges of the fissure, dragging broken bodies up from the depths. Children. Their faces were sunken, their skin stretched tight over brittle bones. Their clothes, tattered, blood-stained, hung off their emaciated frames like funeral shrouds. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their eyes, hollow, accusing, said everything. You were here. You knew. You let this happen. Fadi screamed. Turk couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The first child pulled itself free of the fissure, its limbs moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Then another. And another. The bunker filled with the sound of dragging feet, of rattling breath. Rashid still knelt, his head bowed, his hand pressed to the broken floor, as if in prayer. as if in apology. The first child reached for him. Its fingers brushed his sleeve, and the lanterns went out. Darkness swallowed the bunker whole. Turk's rifle clattered to the ground. Somewhere in the black, Malik choked out a single word: run. The last thing Turk heard before the screaming started was the sound of the bunker door slamming shut, locked. From the inside, morning brought no relief. Turk sat slumped against the bunker wall, his body aching with exhaustion. But the others looked no better. Fadi's hands trembled as he chewed on a stale piece of bread. Malik's eyes were bloodshot and hollow, and even Rashid's usual stoicism had cracked, that his shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. The fissure in the floor had sealed itself at dawn, as if the earth had swallowed the horrors of the night whole. But the air still stank of damp soil and something metallic, a lingering reminder of what had clawed its way out of the dark. Turk reached for his ration pack, his fingers brushing the canvas bag where he kept his food. And froze. It was empty. He frowned, turning the bag inside out. Nothing. Not even crumbs. "Malik," he muttered, "did you take my rations?" Malik blinked at him, his face gaunt. "What?" "No." Fadi let out a shaky laugh. Maybe the ghosts got hungry. No one else laughed. Rashid stood abruptly, his boots scuffing against the concrete as he moved to the supply crates. He flipped open the lid of the nearest one, his expression darkening. "Ours are gone too." Turk's stomach twisted. They had stacked the crates against the far wall last night, sealed tight. Now, the locks hung broken, the insides picked clean. Malik ran a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense. We were all in here. No one could have." Private Jawad, who had been silent all night, suddenly spoke up. His voice was hoarse, his eyes darting to the shadows. "I saw something." The room went still. Rashid turned slowly. "What?" Jawad swallowed hard. "Last night, before the knocking started, I saw figures. Small ones, moving in the dark." Fadi let out a nervous chuckle. "Figures? Like kids?" Jawad didn't answer. He didn't need to. Turk's skin prickled. The handprints, the whispers, the fissure. And now this, rations vanishing overnight, as if something had crept in while they slept. No, not something. Someone small. Hungry. Malik's voice was barely audible. "They're not just voices." Rashid exhaled sharply through his nose, his grip tightening on the edge of the crate. "We searched the bunker. Every corner, every crack." Turk didn't argue. He moved to the far wall, where the shadows were thickest, his rifle raised. The concrete was cold under his fingertips, the air stale. Then, a sound. A faint scritch like nails on stone, coming from inside the wall. Turk's breath caught. He pressed his ear to the concrete. Silence. Then, a whisper. Hungry, he recoiled, his pulse roaring in his ears. Malik was at his side in an instant. "What? What is it?" Turk couldn't speak. He just pointed at the wall. Rashid strode over, his jaw set. Without a word, he raised his rifle and slammed the butt of it against the concrete. The sound echoed through the bunker. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, a giggle, high-pitched, playful, and from deep within the walls, the sound of small, scurrying feet. The night was thick with silence. Turk and Malik stood guard at the bunker entrance, rifles slung over their shoulders, eyes scanning the ruins beyond. The moon cast jagged shadows across the broken streets, turning rubble into grotesque silhouettes. The air smelled of dust and something faintly sour, like old blood. Malik shifted his weight, his breath fogging in the cold. "You think they'll come back tonight?" Turk didn't answer. He didn't need to. The whispers had grown bolder with each passing hour, the scratching in the walls more insistent. Whatever they weren't leaving. A gust of wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it the faintest echo of laughter. Malik's grip tightened on his rifle. "You hear that?" "What?" Turk nodded. The sound was distant, but unmistakable, children's voices, playful and light, skittering through the dark like rats. Then, another sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Turk's pulse spiked. The steps weren't outside. They were inside the bunker, just beyond the entrance, where the lantern light didn't reach. Alik turned sharply, his breath shallow. "Rashid?" No answer. The footsteps stopped. Turk raised his rifle, finger hovering over the trigger. The darkness beyond the doorway yawned, impenetrable. Then, a shadow flickered at the edge of his vision. Small, quick, a child's silhouette, darting past the threshold. Malik sucked in a sharp breath. "Did you?" Turk didn't wait. He lunged forward, rifle raised, and swung the lantern toward the movement. The light spilled across empty concrete. Nothing, no footsteps, no child. Just the bunker's hollow silence. Malik exhaled shakily. Maybe it was just a whisper right beside Turk's ear, "You see me." He whirled, heart hammering, and there, for the briefest second, he did. A small figure, no taller than his waist, standing at the far end of the corridor. Its face was obscured by shadow, but its posture was unmistakable, head tilted, arms limp at its sides. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it stepped backward, into the wall. The concrete rippled like water, swallowing the child whole. Malik made a choked sound. But Turk was already moving, sprinting down the corridor, his boots pounding against the floor. He skidded to a stop where the figure had vanished, slamming his palm against the wall. Solid, unbroken, no sign of passage. Behind him, Malik's voice was thin with terror. "We need to get out of here." Turk didn't argue, but as they turned to leave, the whisper came again, this time from inside the wall beside them, "Stay." The lantern flickered and went out. In the suffocating dark, something giggled. Private Jawad had always been the skeptic. He sat with his back against the bunker wall, rifle across his knees, listening to Malik's frantic whispers about shadows and voices. Ghosts. The word sat heavy in the air, ridiculous and terrifying all at once. Jawad scoffed, shaking his head. "You're hearing things. It's the wind. Or stress." Malik's hands clenched. "I saw it, Jawad." So did Turk. Turk didn't confirm or deny. He just stared at the wall where the child had vanished, his expression unreadable. Jawad rolled his shoulders, forcing a smirk. "Right. A kid walked through a solid wall. Next, you'll tell me the dead are climbing out of the ground." A beat of silence. Malik's face darkened. Jawad's smirk faltered. Then, a whisper. "Jawad." His name. Spoken in a voice he didn't recognize, soft, rasping, like dry leaves scraping stone. Jawad stiffened. "Who said that?" Turk and Malik exchanged glances. Neither had spoken. Jawad. Closer this time, right beside his ear. His pulse spiked. He twisted, scanning the shadows. Empty. Malik's voice was tight. "You hear it now, don't you?" Jawad swallowed hard. "Shut up. You don't believe." The whisper slithered around him, weaving through the air like smoke. Jawad stood abruptly, rifle raised. "Enough. This isn't funny." No one laughed. The bunker was silent. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow raps against the wall behind him. Jawad spun, his breath coming too fast. The concrete was smooth, unbroken. Knock. 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 From the opposite wall. Then the ceiling. Then the floor. A chorus of knocking surrounding him, pressing in from all sides. Jawad's hands shook. "Stop it, you don't believe," the whisper taunted. "But you will." The knocking crescendoed, a deafening, frantic rhythm, then cut off abruptly. Silence. Jawad's chest heaved. Sweat slicked his palms. Then, from the darkness beyond the lantern light, a child's voice, "Look at me." Jawad didn't want to. But he did. At the far end of the bunker, a small figure stood silhouetted against the shadows. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, its arms limp, and its eyes, God, its eyes black, hollow, endless. Jawad's rifle clattered to the ground. The child smiled. "Now you see." The lantern guttered, and the darkness rushed in. The radio crackled to life just before dawn. Turk jolted awake, his hand already reaching for his rifle. The bunker was still, the others slumped in uneasy sleep, except for Rashid, who stood frozen by the comms unit, his fingers gripping the receiver like a lifeline. Static hissed through the speakers, sharp and discordant. Then, beneath the noise, whispers, not the scattered, pleading voices from before. These were organized, layered over one another, in a chorus of broken syllables. Turk stood, his muscles stiff with exhaustion. "What is that?" "Dad." Rashid didn't answer. His jaw was clenched tight, his eyes fixed on the radio as if it might explode. The static swelled, swallowing the whispers whole. Then, a voice. Clear. Human. "Any units in Hama, respond," Lieutenant Amir's voice. Turk's pulse spiked. "That's command." Rashid slammed his palm against the receiver. "Don't." The radio screeched, the signal warping, twisting Amir's words into something grotesque. "They're in the walls." Malik stirred, blinking blearily. "What?" The radio cut out. Silence. Then, a child's giggle, bubbling through the static. Rashid ripped the cord from the wall. The sudden quiet was deafening. Turk's hands trembled. That wasn't just interference. Rashid's voice was low, rough. "We're being watched. Listened to." Fadi, now fully awake, hugged his knees to his chest. "They're playing with us. Like a game." The words hung in the air, sour and inevitable. Outside, the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the bunker walls. It painted the concrete in thin, sickly stripes, illuminating the handprints they could never scrub away. Turk exhaled slowly. "We need to sweep the perimeter. Check the comms lines." Rashid nodded, though his eyes were distant. "Pairs. No one goes alone." The others stirred, pulling on boots, checking ammunition. Routine. Normalcy. A pathetic pantomime of control. Malik leaned close as they stepped into the pale morning light. "You know we won't find anything, right?" Turk didn't answer. He already knew. The radio hadn't just failed. Something had answered. And it was still listening. Turk's eyelids fluttered shut against his will, exhaustion finally dragging him under. The world dissolved into darkness, but not peace. The dream came like a flood. He stood in the ruins of Hama, but not as they were now. The buildings loomed whole and unbroken, the streets alive with the murmur of voices, the laughter of children. The air smelled of baking bread and jasmine, not smoke and decay. Then, a tremor. The ground shook beneath his feet. The buildings rippled, their facades cracking like eggshells. Screams tore through the air as the street split open, swallowing men, women, children. Turk lunged forward without thinking, his boots skidding on crumbling concrete. A small hand reached up from the fissure, fingers grasping blindly. A boy, no older than 6, his face streaked with dust and tears. "Help me." Turk stretched out his arm, his fingertips brushing the boys, and the earth roared. The fissure yawned wider, dragging the child down into the black. His screams echoed as he fell, fading into the depths. Turk stumbled back, his breath ragged. Around him, the ruins of Hama reassembled themselves, not as they had been, but as they were now. Broken. Dead. And the handprints. Everywhere. On the walls. The rubble. The ground. Tiny palms pressed into the dust, leading toward a single shadowed alley. A whisper curled through the air, "Follow." Turk's feet moved on their own. The alley narrowed, the walls pressing in, the light fading. At the end, a single doorway stood ajar, darkness pooling beyond it. The whispers grew louder. "You remember. You were there. You let us die." Turk's pulse hammered in his throat. He reached for the door and woke to knocking. Real, physical knocking, 3 sharp raps against the frame of his cot. Turk jerked upright, sweat cooling on his skin. The bunker was dim, the others still asleep. Only Rashid was awake, standing over him, his face unreadable in the weak light. "You were dreaming," Rashid said quietly. Turk swallowed, his throat dry. "Yeah." Rashid's eyes flicked to the bunker entrance, then back. "It's starting again." Turk didn't need to ask what it was. The whispers slithered through the walls, a chorus of broken voices. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed from every direction at once. Rashid exhaled sharply. "Get up. We're not sleeping tonight." Turk swung his legs over the cot, his dreams still clinging to him like cobwebs. The boy's face, his outstretched hand, burned behind his eyelids. Somewhere in the bunker, a child giggled, not in the walls. Inside. Turk's blood turned to ice. The whispers weren't just echoes anymore. They were here. Morning light seeped into the bunker, thin and hesitant, as if afraid to reveal what the night had left behind. Turk was the first to see it. A fissure. Not in the floor this time, but in the far wall. A jagged split running from ceiling to floor, its edges rough and uneven. It hadn't been there the night before. He approached slowly, his boots scuffing against the concrete. The crack was narrow, barely the width of a finger, but deep. Blackness pooled within it. Impenetrable. Malik stirred behind him, rubbing his eyes. "What is it?" Turk didn't answer. He leaned closer, peering into the darkness, and froze. A sound. Faint. Broken. Sobbing. A child's cries, muffled, as if coming from somewhere far away. The sound clawed at his ribs, small and desperate. Malik was at his side in an instant. "You hear that?" Turk nodded, his throat tight. The others roused one by one, drawn by the tension in the air. Fadi hovered near the back, his fingers twisting in the fabric of his shirt. Jawad stood with his arms crossed, his jaw set, but his eyes darted to the crack every few seconds. Rashid pushed forward, his expression unreadable. He pressed his palm against the wall beside the fissure, his fingers splayed. The concrete was cool under his touch. "It's fresh," he muttered. The sobbing continued, soft and rhythmic. Fadi swallowed hard. We should seal it before something gets in." Jawad scoffed, but his voice lacked its usual bite. "Seal it with what? Our hands?" Malik ignored him, stepping closer to the crack. "Hello?" he called, his voice too loud in the cramped space. The sobbing stopped. Silence. Then, a whisper, so close it could have been right against the other side of the wall. "Help me." Tarek's breath caught. The voice was small, fragile, a little girl's. Malik recoiled. There's someone in there. Rashid's hand dropped to his side. No, there isn't. But you heard. I heard nothing, Rashid snapped, his voice cutting through the bunker like a blade. We do not dig. We do not answer. We ignore it. Turk stared at the crack. The darkness within seemed to pulse, breathing. Then a sound. Scratch. 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 Fingernails dragging against concrete. From the other side, Fadi let out a whimper. It's trying to get out. The scratching grew frantic, desperate. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Tarek's pulse roared in his ears. His fingers twitched toward his rifle. But what good would bullets do against stone? Against whatever was inside? Rashid turned abruptly, his face a mask of cold fury. Everyone out. Now. No one moved. The scratching stopped. Then a single tiny tap, like a fingertip pressing against the crack from within. Malik's voice was barely a whisper. Turk. He followed Malik's gaze. At the base of the fissure, something dark and wet seeped into the concrete. Blood. Fresh. Dripping from inside the wall. Jawad backed away, his breath coming too fast. We need to go. Rashid didn't argue this time. The men scrambled for the exit, their boots pounding against the floor. Turk was the last to leave, his eyes locked on the crack until the very last second. As the bunker door slammed shut behind them, he could have sworn he heard it. A child's voice, whispering through the fissure. You left me again. Outside, the ruins of Hama loomed, silent and watchful. The crack in the wall was only the beginning. The air inside the bunker was thick with the scent of sweat and gun oil, the men sitting in tense silence. The crack in the wall had stopped bleeding, but no one dared to touch it. No one even looked at it. The whispers had quieted, but the absence of sound was worse. It felt like the calm before a storm. Private Fadi was the first to break. Turk saw it before it happened, the way Fadi's hands shook, the way his breath hitched like a man drowning. His eyes darted between the crack in the door, his fingers digging into his thighs. Then, without warning, he stood. I can't, he whispered. Rashid looked up, his expression hardening. Sit down, Private. Fadi shook his head, backing toward the door. No, I can't. His voice cracked, and then he was moving, bolting for the entrance, his boots slamming against the concrete. The others barely had time to react before he wrenched the door open and disappeared into the ruins beyond. Silence. Malik was the first to speak, his voice hollow. Should we go after him? Rashid exhaled sharply through his nose, his jaw clenched. No. Dishan. Turk stared at the open door, the pale morning light spilling in. Fadi was gone, swallowed by the skeletal remains of Hama. He should have felt something, guilt, maybe, or fear for the kid. But all he felt was a dull, creeping dread, because Fadi wasn't running from something. He was running toward it. They found him hours later. Turk and Malik moved through the ruins in uneasy silence, rifles slung but ready. The city was too quiet, the only sound the crunch of rubble underfoot. Then, a whimper. Tarek's grip tightened on his weapon as they rounded a collapsed storefront. Fadi sat curled against a broken wall, his arms wrapped around his knees, rocking back and forth. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and tears. His lips moved soundlessly, forming words that didn't quite reach the air. Malik crouched beside him. Fadi? You okay? Fadi's head snapped up, his eyes wild. They're buried, he hissed. All of them. The children, the ones from the well, they're still here. Tarek's blood ran cold. Fadi grabbed Malik's sleeve, his fingers trembling. They're in the walls. In the ground, They're hungry. Malik tried to pull away, but Fadi held on, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. They showed me the massacre. The soldiers lined them up, and... A sob choked off his words. Turk exchanged a glance with Malik. Fadi had never been to Hama before this mission. He couldn't have known about the well, about the bodies. But he did now. Fadi's grip slackened, his eyes glazing over. They want us to remember, he whispered. They want us to see. Then his head lolled forward, his body going limp. Malik caught him before he hit the ground. Fadi? Fadi. No response. Turk knelt, pressing 2 fingers to Fadi's neck. His pulse fluttered, weak but steady. He was alive, just unconscious. Malik exhaled shakily. What happened to him? Turk didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ruins around them were too still, too quiet, and somewhere beneath their feet, something stirred. Lieutenant Amir returned at dusk. His jeep skidded to a halt outside the bunker, kicking up a cloud of dust that clung to the air like smoke. He didn't step out immediately. Instead, he sat behind the wheel, his fingers gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes, wide, darting, scanned the ruins, as if expecting something to lunge from the shadows. Turk watched from the bunker entrance, his rifle loose in his hands. The lieutenant's posture was all wrong. The man who had dismissed their reports with cold authority days ago now looked like a cornered animal. Finally, Amir climbed out. His uniform was disheveled, his face gaunt. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes. Rashid stepped forward, saluting. Sir. Amir didn't return the gesture. His gaze flicked past Rashid, past the men, to the bunker's gaping entrance. You've seen them, he said, voice raw, not a question. Aim me, a confession. Silence. Malik shifted uneasily. Seen what, sir? Amir's laugh was a brittle, broken thing. Don't. Just don't. He dragged a hand down his face, his breath shuddering. I thought it was stress. Sleep deprivation. But it's not, is it? Turk's throat tightened. The lieutenant's fear was palpable, souring the air between them. Rashid's voice was low. You knew. Amir didn't deny it. His shoulders slumped, the weight of something unseen pressing down on him. Hama was always haunted. The words hung in the air, too heavy to dismiss. Then, a whisper. Not from the ruins. Not from the bunker, from the jeep. A child's voice, soft and sing-song, you left us here. Amir flinched as if struck. His head snapped toward the vehicle, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Turk's pulse spiked. The jeep was empty, but the voice had been real. Amir's hands shook. They're getting louder, he murmured, more to himself than to them. They're angry. Malik took a step back. Sir, maybe we should, they're in the walls. Amir's shout ripped through the dusk, sharp as gunfire. His composure shattered like glass, his chest heaving. They're in the walls. Don't you hear them? Don't you see them? His voice cracked on the last word. Silence. Then, from the bunker behind them, a whisper, Amir. The lieutenant's face drained of color. The voice wasn't just speaking to him. It was saying his name. Rashid moved first, stepping between Amir and the bunker. We need to go. Now. Amir didn't argue. He stumbled back toward the jeep, his legs unsteady. Turk glanced at the bunker entrance. The shadows within seemed to pulse, breathing. And then, a giggle. High-pitched, playful. Amir froze. The whispers surged, a chorus of broken voices overlapping, rising in volume until they drowned out all else. You remember. You were there. You let us die. Amir's knees buckled. He caught himself on the Jeep's hood, his breath coming in ragged gasps. No, he choked out. No, I didn't. I didn't know. The whispers didn't care. They pressed in. Relentless, suffocating. Liar. Amir screamed. It wasn't a sound of anger. It was the sound of a man breaking. Turk lunged forward, grabbing the lieutenant's arm. We have to move. Amir didn't resist. He let himself be dragged into the Jeep, his body limp, his eyes vacant. Rashid slammed the door shut behind him. Go. The engine roared to life. As the Jeep peeled away, Turk caught one last glimpse of Amir's face through the dust-streaked window, pale, shattered, his lips moving in silent prayer. The whispers followed him, and in the ruins of Hama, something laughed. Lieutenant Amir's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, the Jeep lurching over debris-strewn streets. His breath came in shallow gasps, his pupils blown wide with terror. Turk sat rigid in the passenger seat, watching the ruins blur past. The whispers had faded with distance, but the weight of them clung like a sickness. Behind them, Rashid and Malik crouched in the open bed of the Jeep, rifles braced against their shoulders, eyes scanning the skeletal buildings. Amir's voice was a broken rasp. They weren't supposed to remember. Turk turned sharply. What? The lieutenant's fingers tightened on the wheel. The well. The children. We buried them deep, sealed it shut. His laugh was a hollow, jagged thing. But the dead don't stay buried in Hama. Malik leaned forward from the back, his face pale. You knew? Knew? Amir didn't answer. His foot slammed on the brake, the Jeep skidding to a halt in the middle of a shattered intersection. Dust billowed around them, catching in the fading light. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, knock, knock, knock. The sound was soft, almost polite, coming from inside the Jeep. Turk's blood turned to ice. Amir's breath hitched. His hands slid from the wheel, his body going slack. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time, from beneath the seats. Malik jerked back, rifle raised. What is that? The Jeep's radio crackled to life, spewing static. Then, beneath the noise, giggling, high-pitched, playful. Amir screamed. He fumbled for the door handle, his movements frantic, desperate. Get out, get out. Turk didn't hesitate. He threw his shoulder against the door, tumbling onto the broken pavement. The others followed, scrambling away from the vehicle as the knocking intensified, a frenzied drumbeat against metal. The Jeep rocked on its axles, as if something were thrashing inside. Then, silence. The radio died. The knocking stopped. The dust settled. Amir lay on his back in the street, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the sky. They're here, he whispered. They're everywhere. Turk's pulse pounded in his throat. He turned to Rashid. We can't stay in the open. Rashid's jaw tightened, back to the bunker. Amir let out a choked sob. No, they're in the walls, we seal it. Rashid snapped. Every crack. Every hole. Nothing gets in. Malik's voice was thin. And if they're already inside? No one answered. The Jeep sat abandoned in the intersection, its doors hanging open like a gutted carcass. Turk forced himself to turn away. Move. They ran. The ruins loomed around them, every shadow a hiding place, every broken window a watching eye. The whispers followed, slithering through the air, pressing against their ears. You can't hide. We see you. We're always here. The bunker's entrance yawned ahead, a maw of darkness. Amir stumbled at the threshold, his knees giving out. "They'll trap us," he gasped, like they did before. Rashid hauled him up by the collar. "Then we fight." Hay dragged the lieutenant inside, the door slamming shut behind them. He bunker was still. The crack in the wall waited, silent and grinning. Amir's breath came in ragged sobs. "Too late," he whispered. "Too late." Turk followed his gaze. The fissure had widened, and from within the blackness, small skeletal fingers curled around the edges, pulling, digging, clawing their way out. The soldiers huddled together, their backs pressed against the bunker's cold concrete as the whispers swirled around them. The voices had merged now, overlapping, twisting into a single word that echoed through the darkness like a prayer or a curse. "Help." The word slithered into Tariq's ears, burrowed into his skull. It wasn't pleading anymore, it was demanding. Malik's breath fogged in the air, his fingers white-knuckled around his rifle. "They're getting louder." No one argued. The crack in the wall had widened further, splitting the concrete like a wound. The blackness within pulsed, breathing. Small, broken whimpers drifted from the fissure, children's voices, lost and afraid. Lieutenant Amir sat crumpled near the entrance, his knees drawn to his chest, his lips moving soundlessly. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, as if he were watching something the others couldn't see. Rashid stood over him, his jaw set. "Get up," he ordered, voice rough. "We're not dying like this." Amir didn't move. His whisper was barely audible. "We already are." "Meow." Turk's pulse hammered. The bunker felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, blood, old and fresh at once. Then, a sound. A wet, ragged crack, like bones snapping. The fissure in the wall moved. The concrete groaned as the crack split wider, jagged edges peeling back like lips parting in a scream. Darkness spilled out, pooling across the floor, thick and viscous. Fadi let out a choked noise. "It's opening." Turk raised his rifle, finger hovering over the trigger. His hand shook. What good were bullets against stone? Against whatever was crawling out of that blackness? The whispers surged, a chorus of voices rising to a deafening crescendo. "Help us. Let us out. We're here." Then a hand. Small. Pale. Fingers curled around the edge of the fissure, nails blackened and broken. Malik staggered back. Oh God, another hand joined the first, then another, dozens of tiny, skeletal fingers clawing at the concrete, dragging emaciated bodies into the dim light. Children. Their skin was stretched tight over brittle bones, their clothes tattered and stained. Their eyes, hollow, black, endless, locked onto the soldiers with a hunger that wasn't human. Amir let out a broken scream. The first child pulled itself free of the fissure, its limbs moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Its mouth opened, too wide, too wrong, and it laughed. The sound was a blade dragged across Turk's spine. Rashid raised his rifle. Fire. Gunshots shattered the air. The bullets tore through the children's frail bodies, but they didn't stop. They didn't fall. They kept coming. Turk's breath came in ragged gasps as he emptied his magazine into the writhing mass. The children didn't bleed. They didn't scream. They just smiled. The first one reached Fadi, its fingers closing around his ankle. He shrieked, kicking wildly, but the grip was iron. More hands seized him, dragging him toward the fissure. No, Malik lunged, grabbing Fadi's arm, but the weight was too much. The children pulled with impossible strength, their whispers rising to a deafening shriek. "You left us. Now we take you." Fadi's screams cut off as the fissure swallowed him whole. The concrete ceiling shut behind him with a sickening snap. Silence. The bunker was still. The crack in the wall was gone. No blood. No sign of struggle. Just empty air where Fadi had been. Amir let out a wet, broken sob. They're real. Turk's hands trembled. He had run out of bullets, out of time. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins of Hama, carrying with it the echoes of children's laughter. The final night had only just begun. The walls shook violently. Dust fell like rain. Something was trying to get in or out. Turk pressed his back against the bunker's cold concrete, his empty rifle clutched uselessly in his hands. The air was thick with the stench of damp earth and something fouler, decay, old and deep. The fissure had vanished, but the whispers hadn't. They slithered through the cracks, coiled around the soldiers like serpents. You can't hide. We see you. Malik's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. They took Fadi. Just like that. His voice cracked. How do we fight that? Rashid's jaw tightened. We don't. He turned to the lieutenant, his voice a low growl. Amir, you knew about this, you knew. Amir didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the spot where the fissure had been, his lips moving silently. His hands trembled, fingers digging into his thighs hard enough to draw blood. Then, a whisper, right against Turk's ear. Tariq. His name. Spoken in a voice he recognized, soft, familiar, his sister's. His breath caught. No. You left me too. The voice murmured, curling around him like smoke. Just like them. Malik flinched. What is it? What do you hear? Tariq couldn't answer. The whisper was inside him now, burrowing into his chest, wrapping around his ribs. The bunker trembled again, harder this time. The lanterns swayed, their light flickering wildly. Shadows stretched and lunged across the walls, twisting into shapes too long, too thin to be human. Amir let out a choked laugh. They're in the walls, he whispered. They're always in the walls. A wet, splintering crack split the air. The floor moved. Tariq stumbled back as the concrete bulged upward, splitting apart like rotten fruit. A small, pale hand punched through, fingers splayed, grasping. Then another. And another. The children were digging their way up. Malik's scream was raw. They're under us. Rashid grabbed Tariq's arm, dragging him toward the door. Move. Now, they ran. The bunker door was still locked from the inside, the rusted hinges shrieking as Rashid wrenched it open. Cold night air rushed in, thick with the scent of smoke and ruin. Amir didn't follow. He stood in the center of the bunker, his arms limp at his sides, staring at the hands clawing free of the floor. His lips curled into a smile. Lieutenant, Turk shouted. Amir didn't turn. I'm sorry, he whispered, to the children, to the dead, to the ghosts of his own past. The floor gave way beneath him. Amir didn't scream as the hands dragged him down. The concrete sealed itself behind him, smooth and unbroken, as if he had never been there at all. Silence. Then a giggle. From inside the bunker, Turk's blood turned to ice. Shid slammed the door shut. Run. Maydi. They sprinted into the ruins, boots skidding over rubble, the night swallowing them whole. Behind them, the bunker groaned, a deep, resonant sound, like a beast waking from slumber. Malik glanced back, his face ashen. It's moving. Tariq didn't look. He already knew. The whispers followed them, weaving through the skeletal buildings, pressing against their backs. You can't leave. We're always here. We're always hungry. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the ruins in sickly gray. But the night wasn't over yet, and Hama wasn't done with them. Dawn bled into the ruins of Hama, pale and sickly. The sky was the color of ash, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, something wrong. Turk crouched behind the skeletal remains of a collapsed storefront, his breath ragged. Beside him, Rashid and Malik pressed low, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. The bunker loomed in the distance, its door hanging open like a slack jaw. Rashid's voice was a whisper. "We can't stay here." Tarek didn't argue. The bunker was a tomb now, its walls breathing with the whispers of the dead. But the ruins beyond were no safer. The city itself was alive, watching, waiting. Malik's hands shook as he checked his rifle. Empty, just like the rest of them. What now? Rashid exhaled sharply. "We move. Find higher ground. Signal for extraction." Turek clenched his jaw. Extraction. As if command would come for them now. As if the whispers hadn't already slithered into their radios, their dreams, their bones. But they had to try. A sound cut through the silence, a rusted hinge groaning. The bunker door swayed in the wind, creaking open wider. Then, from inside, knock. 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 Slow. Deliberate. Malik's breath hitched. "They're still in there." Yeah. Rashid stood abruptly, his face a mask of cold resolve. "We go. Now." They ran. The ruins blurred past, jagged shadows stretching like grasping fingers. Turk's boots pounded over broken concrete, his pulse roaring in his ears. The whispers followed, threading through the air, curling around his ankles like chains. "You can't leave. We see you. We're always here." Tarek didn't look back. The city twisted around them, streets folding in on themselves, alleys leading nowhere. The sky darkened, though dawn had barely broken. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of iron and rot. Malik stumbled, his foot catching on rubble. He fell hard, his palms scraping against broken stone. Go. He gasped, scrambling to his knees. Rashid hauled him up, his grip bruising. Move. Behind them, the whispers surged, a chorus of broken voices rising to a shriek. Stay. The ground trembled. Tarek risked a glance back. The ruins moved. Shadows pooled and twisted, stretching into shapes too long, too thin. Small figures darted between the skeletal buildings, their movements jerky, unnatural. The children. Their hollow eyes gleamed in the half-light, their mouths stretched into grins too wide, too wrong. Malik let out a choked sob. "They're everywhere." Rashid shoved him forward. "Run." They sprinted for the city's edge, where the ruins gave way to open desert. The whispers howled behind them, the wind itself screaming in rage. The children's laughter skittered through the air, high-pitched and gleeful. "You can't hide. We'll find you. We always do." Tarek's lungs burned. His legs screamed, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The desert stretched ahead, barren and endless. The first bullet whizzed past his ear. Turk flinched, skidding to a halt. Ahead, figures emerged from the haze, soldiers, their rifles raised, their faces obscured by dust and shadow. Command. Extraction. Rashid bellowed, his voice raw. "Hold your fire. Hold your fire." The soldiers didn't lower their weapons. A voice crackled over a megaphone, distorted and hollow. "Halt and identify." Malik raised his hands, his chest heaving. "We're yours. We're yours." The megaphone hissed. Silence. "Then you are not cleared for extraction." Tarek's blood turned to ice. The soldiers opened fire. Bullets tore into the earth at their feet, kicking up plumes of dust. Rashid cursed, dragging Tarek and Malik behind the husk of an overturned truck. "They're shooting at us." Malik gasped. Rashid's face was grim. They think we're them, the whispers. The children. The things wearing their faces. Turk's stomach twisted. He peered around the truck's edge. The soldiers advanced, their rifles trained, their movements mechanical. Beyond them, a transport idled, its engine growling. Their only way out. A whisper curled against Turk's ear, soft and sweet. "Let us help." He recoiled. The children stood beside him, their forms flickering like mirages. Their hollow eyes gleamed, their fingers brushing his sleeve. "We can take you home." Malik let out a strangled noise. "Turk, don't." Turk didn't move. The children smiled. Then they lunged. Not at him. Past him. Their small, emaciated bodies streaked toward the soldiers, their mouths unhinging, their limbs elongating, twisting into something monstrous. The screams started instantly. The soldiers' gunfire turned frantic, wild, their shouts dissolving into wet, choking gasps. Shadows swallowed them whole, the children's laughter rising to a deafening crescendo. Rashid grabbed Turk's arm. Now. They ran for the transport. The vehicle was empty, the keys still in the ignition. Malik scrambled into the driver's seat, his hands shaking as he turned the engine over. It roared to life, the sound drowning out the chaos behind them. Turk didn't look back. The tires spun, kicking up dust as the transport peeled away from the ruins, from the screams, from the bunker's gaping maw. Hama shrank in the rearview mirror, its skeletal building silhouetted against the rising sun. But the whispers didn't fade. They curled into the cab, soft and insistent, threading through the roar of the engine. "You'll come back. You always do. We'll be waiting." Turk closed his eyes. The desert stretched ahead, endless and barren. But Hama was never truly behind them. It was in the walls. In the blood, in the whispers that would never, could never let them go. The transport rattled into the base like a ghost ship drifting into port. Turk slumped in his seat, his hand still gripping the dashboard, as if it could anchor him to reality. Beside him, Malik sat frozen, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. Rashid was already moving before the engine died, his boots hitting the gravel with a hollow thud. No one spoke. Obo. The base was alive with the usual hum of soldiers and machinery, but the noise felt distant, muffled, as if heard through water. Turk's ears still rang with the whispers, his skin prickling with the phantom touch of small, grasping hands. A sergeant approached, his brow furrowed. "Where's the rest of your unit?" Rashid's voice was flat. "Dead." The sergeant hesitated, then nodded as if this were expected. "Debrief at 1800. Command wants a full report." Rashid didn't react. Understood. The sergeant walked away, already shouting orders to another squad. Malik exhaled shakily. "That's it? No questions?" "No, no investigation." Turk watched the sergeants retreating back. The man hadn't even blinked at the news. Because he already knew. Hama had always been a graveyard. The debrief was a farce. They sat in a cramped office, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and gun oil. Lieutenant Colonel Farouk, a man with a face like weathered stone, listened without expression as Rashid delivered the official report. Ambush. Hostiles in the ruins. Casualties sustained. No mention of whispers. No fissures in the earth. No children crawling from the walls. Farouk's pen scratched across the paper. And Lieutenant Amir. Rashid's jaw tightened. Kia, a lie. Farouk didn't question it. He just nodded, stamped the report, and dismissed them with a wave of his hand. Outside, Malik grabbed Tariq's arm, his voice a hissed whisper. They know what's in Hama, and they're just pretending it didn't happen. Turk didn't answer. He was watching the soldiers milling around the barracks. The way their eyes flicked to the three survivors, then away too fast. The way their whispers carried, not of ghosts, but of something worse. Madness. Rashid lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around his face like fog. We stick to the story. No deviations. Malik's laugh was brittle. Or what? They'll lock us up for being crazy? Rashid exhaled slowly. Or they'll send us back. The words hung in the air, sour and inevitable. Turk's fingers twitched toward his pocket, where the photograph of his sister had long since crumpled into dust. Somewhere, deep in the bowels of the base, a radio crackled to life, just for a second, and a child's voice whispered through the static, "You can't leave us." No one else seemed to hear it. But Turk did, and he knew. Hama wasn't done with them yet. Months passed like a fever dream. Turk sat in the dim light of the barracks, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling. The base was quiet, save for the distant hum of generators and the occasional shout from the training yard. The war ground on, but for him it had faded into background noise, a dull, distant thing compared to the whispers that still coiled in his skull. Rashid had been reassigned. No explanation, no farewell. Just a transfer order stamped in red ink and a jeep waiting at dawn. He hadn't looked back as he left. Malik was worse. He jumped at shadows, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold a rifle. The medics diagnosed him with combat stress, prescribed him pills that turned his eyes glassy and his words slow. He spent his days staring at walls, flinching whenever the wind rattled the windows. Turk knew better. It wasn't the wind Malik was listening to. The patrol found the bunker in late autumn. A routine sweep of Hama's ruins, just to ensure no insurgents had crept back into the graveyard. The report came in over the radio, the soldier's voice cracking with static, and something else. Fear. It's gone. The whole structure just collapsed, like something crushed it from the inside. Turk stood in the comms tent, his breath fogging in the cold air. The officer on duty glanced at him, then quickly away. They all did that now. No bodies were recovered, no signs of struggle. Just rubble and dust and silence. Turk walked back to the barracks under a sky the color of old bruises. The whispers followed, slithering through the cracks in the pavement, curling around his ankles like smoke. You remember. You were there. You'll come back. He didn't answer. That night, he dreamed of the bunker. Not as it had been, broken, bleeding, but as it was now. A tomb. A mouth sealed shut. And beneath the rubble, something stirred. Small hands pressed against the weight of stone. Pushing. Digging. Waiting for the walls to crack again. Turk woke to the sound of knocking. 3 slow, deliberate raps against the barracks door. He didn't get up. He knew no one was there. Outside, the wind howled through the base, carrying with it the faintest echo of children's laughter. Hama was never truly behind them. It was in the walls, and the walls were listening. Years later, in a dim cafe on the outskirts of Damascus, the journalist leaned forward, her recorder humming between them. The man across from her, once Corporal Turk Hassan, stared into his untouched coffee, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup like a prayer bead. "You're the last one left," she said softly. Turk's throat worked. Rashid dead in a training accident, officially. Malik vanished from a psychiatric ward. No note, no body. Just an open window and small, muddy handprints on the sill. And him. The survivor. The witness. The one who still heard them in his sleep. The journalist's voice was gentle. "Tell me about Hama." The cafe noise faded. The air grew thick, pressing against his eardrums like the weight before a storm. Turk closed his eyes. Knock. 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 The sound was in his skull now, rhythmic, relentless. The whispers followed, threading through his thoughts, curling around his ribs. You remember. Tell her. Make her see. His hands trembled. We weren't the first ones there. The journalist frowned. The insurgents, no. The word came out too sharp. A man at the next table glanced over. Turk lowered his voice. Not them, the others. The ones in the walls. Her pen hesitated above her notepad. He knew that look. The delicate balance between professional curiosity and the fear of humoring a madman. But the whispers didn't care. They surged forward, dragging the words from his lips like shrapnel from a wound. They were children. Dia, he rasped. Hundreds of them, buried alive in the well when the city fell the first time. We didn't know. I didn't know. Until they started crawling out of the cracks. The journalist's fingers tightened around her pen. Crawling out. Not a question. An echo. Turk's coffee rippled. Just a tremor in his hand, he told himself. Not the table vibrating. Not the liquid darkening. Thickening, blood in the dust. Small fingers curling around concrete. He shoved the cup away. They weren't ghosts. They were hungry. And they knew our names. The recorder hissed. The cafe's overhead light flickered. The journalist didn't flinch. What happened to your unit? Turk's laugh was a broken thing. They're still there. In the walls. In the earth. He leaned forward, his shadow stretching too long, too thin across the table. You think we escaped? They let us go, so we'd carry them with us. So we'd spread the whispers. A child giggled. High-pitched. Close. The journalist's head snapped up. Did you? Turk didn't answer. He was staring past her, at the cafe's fogged window. A handprint. Small. Perfect. Pressed into the glass from the outside. The journalist turned. The street was empty. The handprint remained. When she faced him again, Turk's eyes were wet. They're getting louder, he whispered. Every night. Every night. The recorder clicked off by itself. The journalist swallowed. Why tell me this now? Turk's smile was a grimace. Because you'll write it. And when you do, his voice cracked. Maybe someone will believe you. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest echo of knocking. 3 slow raps. Always 3. The journalist's pen hovered over her notepad. The last line she wrote before leaving was never published. He still hears the whispers in his sleep. And now, so do I. The wind carried the scent of decay through the ruins of Hama as Elias Karam adjusted the recording equipment strapped to his chest. The paranormal researcher's fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the electric thrill of the unknown. His boots crunched over broken concrete as he stepped into the skeletal remains of the bunker, its gaping entrance like the mouth of a beast frozen mid-scream. Testing audio. Elias murmured into his lapel mic. The recorder hissed softly in response, its red light blinking like a watchful eye. The bunker was smaller than he'd imagined from the survivor's testimony. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, the deepest one, the one described in hushed, haunted tones, now sealed with fresh concrete. A hasty patch job, uneven and weeping dark stains at the edges. Elias crouched, running a gloved hand over the floor. The air here was thick, oppressive, as if the weight of the past had settled into the very stone. He pressed play on his handheld recorder, letting the static hum fill the silence. Tell me what happened here, he whispered, not expecting an answer. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a whisper. Faint. Fractured. Help. Elias's breath caught. The voice was young, a child's threadbare with fear. His pulse roared in his ears as he checked the recorder. The waveform spiked, jagged and undeniable. Real. He swallowed hard. Who are you? Silence. Then, softer, another voice, this one a boy's, trembling. They buried us. The words slithered into Elias's bones, cold and certain. He glanced at the sealed crack in the wall. The stains along its edges looked too much like old blood. His recorder hissed again, the static resolving into overlapping whispers, dozens of them, layered over each other in a chorus of despair. Don't leave us. It's dark. Please. Elias's hands shook as he adjusted the gain. This wasn't just residual energy. This was interactive. The voices responded to him, to his presence. He pressed the recorder closer to the sealed crack. How many of you are there? The static surged, swallowing his question whole. Then, all of us. The whisper came not from the recorder, but from inside the wall, right beside his ear. Elias jerked back, his shoulders slamming into the concrete. The recorder tumbled from his grip, its display flickering wildly as the whispers erupted. You hear us. Tell them. Don't let them forget. The voices rose to a shriek, the recorder's speakers distorting under the assault. Elias grabbed it, his fingers slipping on the buttons as he tried to stop the playback. Too late. The sealed crack in the wall moved. A wet, splintering crack split the air as the fresh concrete bulged outward, fissures racing through its surface. Something dark and viscous oozed from the gaps. Elias scrambled backward, his boots slipping on the damp floor. The recorder, still clutched in his hand, screamed with the voices of the dead. Then, silence. The crack held. The concrete groaned but didn't break. Elias's breath came in ragged gasps. The recorder's display flashed 47 seconds of clear audio. 47 seconds of children begging for help. His hands trembled as he ejected the memory card, tucking it into his breast pocket like a sacred relic. The bunker was still again, the air thick with the scent of iron and damp earth. But as Elias turned to leave, a final whisper curled from the darkness behind him. Come back soon. The words followed him into the sunlight, clinging like cobwebs as he fled the ruins. Hama was not done with him yet. Elias's breath fogged in the cold air as he knelt in the bunker's dust, his fingers tracing the outline of a small, perfect handprint. It was fresh, untouched by time, as if pressed into the grime moments before he arrived. His pulse quickened. This shouldn't be possible. The print was too crisp, too deliberate. The fingers splayed, the palm curved as if the child had braced themselves against the floor. He pulled out his camera, the flash illuminating the print in stark relief. The dust around it was undisturbed, no footprints leading to or from it. A whisper curled through the air, so faint he almost mistook it for the wind. You found me. Elias's head snapped up. The bunker was empty, the late afternoon light slanting through cracks in the ceiling. But the voice had been real, young, playful, a child's. He checked his recorder. The waveform showed no spike, no audio distortion. The voice hadn't come through the device. It had spoken directly to him. Swallowing hard, Elias pressed his own hand beside the print. His fingers dwarfed it. This wasn't a trick of the light or a pareidolia-induced illusion. It was real. A chill skittered down his spine. The survivor's testimony had mentioned handprints, small ones, appearing where they shouldn't, leading soldiers deeper into the nightmare. And now they were leading him. Another whisper, this time from the far corner of the bunker. Look. Elias turned, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. More prints dotted the floor, trailing toward the sealed crack in the wall. The concrete patch was darker now, the edges weeping a thin, viscous fluid. Not water. Something thicker. Blood. His stomach twisted. The survivor had described this too, the crack, the hands clawing through, the children dragging themselves free. A drop of dark liquid hit the floor with a soft plink. Then another. The crack was bleeding. Elias backed toward the exit, his boots scuffing against the concrete. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to leave, now, before the sun dipped below the horizon. But the researcher in him hesitated, his gaze locked on the crack. What if this was the breakthrough? What if the voices wanted to be heard? A final whisper, so close it brushed against his ear like a breath. Stay. The words slithered into his skull, wrapping around his thoughts. For a heartbeat, Elias wanted to obey. The urge to kneel, to press his ear to the crack and listen, was almost overwhelming. Then, a sound from outside. Distant, but unmistakable. Gunfire. The spell broke. Elias stumbled back, nearly tripping over debris. The war wasn't over. Hama was still contested territory. But staying after dark wasn't just dangerous, it was suicidal. He grabbed his equipment, shoving the camera into his bag. The handprint glowed faintly in the dying light, a silent accusation. "I'll come back," he whispered, unsure if it was a promise or a lie. The bunker offered no reply. As Elias stepped into the fading daylight, the wind carried a final whisper, so soft he might have imagined it. "We'll be waiting." The road out of Hama stretched before him, empty and desolate. Behind him, the bunker's shadows deepened, and the crack in the wall breathed. Elias Karam died on a Thursday. The cancer had eaten through him swiftly, leaving his body hollowed out like the ruins he had spent his life studying. His colleagues murmured about irony. A man who chased ghosts, consumed from within by something just as invisible. They didn't know about the recorder. It sat on his nightstand until the end, its red light blinking in the dark like a watchful eye. The memory card inside held hours of audio whispers, please, the unmistakable sound of small hands scratching against concrete. But the final recording was different. 47 seconds of silence. Then, in the last moment before the tape ran out, a whisper. "We are still here." The voice was young, certain, and not alone. Elias's fingers had twitched toward the recorder as the life left his eyes, as if to press stop. But it was too late. The whisper had already escaped, curling into the air like smoke, joining the chorus of voices that could never fade. His will was specific. The recorder was to be buried with him, sealed in the earth like the well in Hama. The undertakers complied without question. They lowered the casket into the ground, shovels biting into damp soil. Above them, the sky was the color of old bruises, the wind carrying the scent of jasmine and decay. No one noticed the handprint on the coffin lid. Small. Perfect. Pressed into the polished wood from the inside. And as the first clods of earth struck the casket, something in the darkness laughed. Soft. Playful. Hungry. The dead were never silent, and Hama was never truly empty. The soldiers gathered around the campfire, their faces flickering in the dim light. The desert wind carried the scent of burning sage and gunpowder, but no one spoke of the war tonight. Tonight they spoke of Hama. Private Hassan, young, green, barely 2 months in the field, leaned forward, his voice hushed. "They say the ruins are haunted." Sergeant Dowd snorted, tossing a scrap of bread into the flames. "All ruins are haunted, kid. War does that." But Corporal Rami shook his head, his gaze distant. "Not like this." "That." The fire crackled, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the sand. Hassan swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" Rami hesitated, then lowered his voice. A year ago, a unit was stationed in the old bunker near the city's edge. 5 men went in. 3 came out. Jawad stiffened. That's classified. Rami ignored him. The survivors swore something was in there with them. Voices. Knocking. Children's voices. A chill skittered down Hassan's spine. Children? But there haven't been kids in Hama for years. Exactly. Rami's eyes gleamed in the firelight. And the ones who made it out. They weren't right after. One shot himself 2 weeks later. The other 2 just disappeared. Silence settled over the group. The wind picked up, howling through the camp like a thing in pain. Hassan rubbed his arms, suddenly cold. You're saying ghosts killed them? Rami shrugged. I'm saying the ruins remember. And sometimes, the dead don't stay buried. Jawad stood abruptly, kicking sand over the fire. Enough. Superstition gets men killed. But as the flames died, Hassan could have sworn he saw something move at the edge of the light, small, quick, darting between the supply crates. When he turned to look, there was nothing, just dust. And the faintest echo of laughter, carried away by the wind. Days later, Hassan stood watch on the perimeter, his rifle heavy in his hands. The ruins of Hama loomed in the distance, skeletal and silent under the moonlight. Then, a sound. Knock. Knock. 3 slow raps against the metal siding of the guard post. Hassan's breath caught. Who's there? No answer. He stepped outside, scanning the empty desert. The sand stretched undisturbed in every direction. Then, from behind him, a whisper, "You left us outside." Hassan spun, rifle raised. But the guard post was empty. The wind howled, carrying with it the faintest echo of children's voices, pleading, laughing. And deep in the ruins, something stirred, waiting, watching. Hungry. The legend of Hama grew, and the whispers never stopped. The whispers clung to the ruins of Hama like a second skin, seeping into the cracks of broken buildings, curling around the rusted husks of abandoned vehicles. The city was a wound that never healed, a scar on the earth that pulsed with something deeper than memory. Elias Karam's notes had been meticulous. Audio recordings, photographs, coordinates of mass graves long since paved over. But one question bled through every page, unanswered, haunting. Were the whispers the dead pleading for justice, or something worse trying to escape? Private Hassan crouched in the shadow of the old bunker, his fingers tracing the rough edges of the sealed crack in the wall. The concrete was damp, the air thick with the scent of iron and wet earth. The stories had led him here, the same way they had led Elias, the same way they had led the soldiers before him. A gust of wind moaned through the ruins, carrying with it the faintest echo of a child's voice. "Help us." Hassan's breath hitched. The sound wasn't from the recorder in his pocket. It was here, in the air, pressing against his eardrums like a physical weight. He fumbled for his notebook, his hands shaking as he scribbled. Day 3. They're responding to me now. Not just echoes. They know I'm here. The wind shifted. Silence. Then knock. 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 3 slow, deliberate raps against the inside of the bunker wall. Hassan jerked back, his pulse roaring in his ears. The sound was unmistakable, flesh and bone striking concrete. Not the wind. Not rats. Something was inside. He pressed his palm against the wall. The concrete was cold, vibrating faintly beneath his touch, as if something were dragging itself along the other side. A whisper curled through the air, so close it could have been inside his own skull. "You hear us." Hassan's throat tightened. "Who are you?" The silence that followed was worse than the whispers. It was a held breath, a predator waiting in the dark. Then, a giggle. High-pitched, playful. It skittered across the bunker floor. darting just beyond the beam of his flashlight. Hassan's fingers tightened around his pen. The stories had warned him about this. The laughter, the way it lured soldiers deeper into the ruins, into the waiting dark. But was it the dead calling for recognition? Or something else? Something hungry, wearing their voices like a mask. He forced himself to stand, his legs unsteady. The crack in the wall seemed to pulse, the edges weeping dark fluid. Fresh. Blood. Another whisper, this time from the fissure itself. Let us out. The word sent a chill down his spine. Not a plea. A demand. Hassan took a step back. The recorder in his pocket clicked on by itself, the red light blinking in the gloom. Static hissed through the tiny speaker, resolving into a chorus of broken voices. You remember. You were there. You left us to die. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, something wrong. The crack in the wall trembled, concrete groaning as it split further. A small, pale hand pressed against the opening, fingers splayed. Hassan's breath came in ragged gasps. This wasn't a ghost. This was physical. This was real. The hand flexed, nails scraping against stone. Then, a voice. Not from the recorder, not from the air, but from the wall itself. We are not dead. The words slithered into Hassan's bones, cold and certain. The hand pushed further, the fissure widening with a wet, splintering crack. Hassan stumbled back, his boots slipping on the damp concrete. The whispers surged, a cacophony of voices rising to a deafening shriek. We are hungry. The crack split open, and the thing inside smiled. Hassan ran. The ruins blurred past, shadows stretching like grasping fingers. The whispers followed, threading through the air, curling around his ankles like chains. Behind him, the bunker groaned, a deep, resonant sound, like a beast waking from slumber. The unanswered question echoed in his skull as he fled, pleading for justice, or something worse. And in the darkness, the whispers laughed. They already knew the answer.